going to give Jim a couple of seconds to get us started with the live stream. But in the meantime, I wanted to introduce you first of all to Gregory Hinton. He is the Vice President for Administrative Services here at North Seattle College. And he will be presenting this talk on African American firsts. So I am going to transition it now to Greg and to Ethic. Thank you very much. Greg, it's all yours.
Hey, thanks. So I was asked to do this basically to launch African American History Month, as well as talk a little bit about systemic racism. So hopefully I can do justice with that. I was a little bit uncomfortable trying to do both, but hopefully we'll be able to pull it off today. And basically what I'm going to do is really focus on education themes. We'll touch on some little things other than that. We're going to really focus on education themes. And we'll go ahead and start with the land acknowledgement. On behalf of North Seattle College, we acknowledge that we occupy the traditional ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Amish tribe, and people that are still here, continue to honor, bring to light their ancient heritage. Without them, we would not have access to this gathering, dialogue, and learning space. We ask that we take this opportunity to thank the original caretakers of this land who are still here. We recognize that enslaved and indentured peoples were forced into unpaid and underpaid labor in the construction of this country, state, and city. To the people who contribute this immeasurable work and their descendants, we acknowledge their indelible mark on the space in which we gather today. It's our collective responsibility to critically interrogate this history, to repair harm, and to honor, protect, and sustain this land. Okay, next slide. So we'll kind of start off just with the systemic racism. This is the median household income by race in the state of Washington. And you can kind of look at there, and I'll just let you look at that and for yourself, and you can see kind of the disparities there with definitely people of color, the BIPOC community. We'll go to the next slide. This is actually another view. Information taken a 5-year span, again, looking at the median incomes for the different people here in the state of Washington. You can again see the disparity of people that tend to be little my color, the caramel, the mocha, the brown people of the world. We'll go next slide. This was a quote by Michelle Obama. The road ahead is not going to be easy. It never is, especially for folks like you and me. Because while we've come so far, the truth is that those age-old problems are stubborn and they haven't fully gone away. And that's from Michelle Obama. Then we're going to play this short video. I got this from Jim Jewell, used his idea. Talks about sports, but it'll be a common theme throughout this presentation as well. We'll go to the video here.
Just one moment, please. Sorry, I had it queued up and I lost it.
Jim, if you'd like me to play it, I think I can.
No, just 1 second.
Okay.
Drinking water before bed burns 46 pounds in 2 weeks. If you are struggling to lose weight and you're...
As we've been talking...
How many black special...
As we've been talking about him for the last couple of years now. So Shannon, what is going on?
Nothing.
There's been a lot of
It's
symbols,
true. Nothing.
a lot of symbols, a lot of gestures. They got all these catchy slogans on the back of helmets, Skip, end racism and stop hate. And they got these hats now. They got diversity and equality and all that stuff. That don't mean anything. That's nice symbolism. Those are nice gestures. But at the end of the day, there's no substance. There's no teeth to what they're saying. And Skip, I don't really know what the NFL can do. I believe Commissioner Roger Goodell is doing everything he possibly can. But at the end of the day, you don't have minorities in position. There's only one. I mean, well, there's two. Miss McCaskey, Virginia McCaskey, she owns the Bears. She's a female. You have Shad Khan down in Jacksonville. He owns the Jags. But other than that, Skip, you got white men. And white men, and what we've seen, have a propensity to hire other white men that look like them, that talk like them, or got referred to them that somebody that looked like them and talked like them. I've never heard a coach have to do what Andy Reid did for EB yesterday. He's been calling the plays. Kyle Shanahan never did that for Sean McVay. They never did that for Matt LaFleur. He never had to do that for Matt Nagy. When you look at the other guys that have gotten jobs and never called plays, the head coach never had to say he called the plays. But that's what Andy Reid is having to do for EB. And it still has gotten him nowhere. Because you know what? Everybody else with Tom Brady, nobody said it was Tom Brady. How many guys got jobs because of Tom Brady? Now, Airbnb, they say, well, that's all Patrick Mahomes. They say that's all Travis Kelce. That's all Tyreek. That's all Andy Reid. When other guys have had just comparable talent and got jobs, and nobody said it was because of the talent. I don't believe EB probably gonna miss out in this hiring cycle. Probably one guy, probably Brian Flores, is probably going to be the only African-American, Skip, that gets one of these head coaching jobs. And it's a shame, but what else can you do, Skip? How do you tell a man that's worth $5 billion, $8 billion, $12 billion who he or she can hire?
So we'll go to the next slide. Again, we just kind of talked about talent is not enough. And that's going to be kind of the theme here is also we're talking about white men making decisions for men of color as well. But let's look at college. We saw some there of sports, but how are black men doing in terms of college? And kind of let you look at this. Again, like I said, we're going to focus today on education. We're going to go to the next slide. We kind of remember this theme here as we go through the presentation today about school refusal. School refusal describes the disorder of a student who refuses to go to school on a regular basis or has problems staying in school. The student may avoid school to cope with stress or fear for a vast number of reasons. Some of those reasons for school refusal can be anxiety. We've had a anxiety panel not too long ago. It could be bullying. It could be family problems at home, or it could be academic issues or difficult relationships with teachers or advisors. Think about that. Academic issues or difficult relationships or lack of support with teachers and or advisors. Think about that as we go through this presentation today. Go to the next slide. So African-American leaders in education, as we look at that, we talked about school refusal. The Seattle Times reported on 23rd May, 2021 that University of Washington had 2% African-American faculty members out of 4,760. They did not reach 100. They actually had 99 faculty members, African-American. How about Washington SPTC? How are we doing in the state technical community colleges? A little higher, around 4% for full-time faculty members that are African-American, 160 out of 4,036. So I'm going to leave it to your imagination why there's a problem with school refusal, attrition rates, persistent rates, graduation rates within our colleges. However, let's look at some African Americans that did set it off. In 1823, Lucius Twilit was the first to graduate from U.S. College, Middlebury College in Vermont. 1828, the first African American Ivy League graduate, Everett Mitchell, graduated from Dartmouth College. 1837, James McCune Smith, the first African American to earn a medical degree. Unfortunately, he had to leave the country to do it. He attended the University of Glasgow in Scotland. He then returned and was a practicing physician in New York City, where he treated both black and white patients. In 1839, Samuel Ford McGill was actually the first graduate African American from American school, that being Dartmouth Medical College. So let's go to the next slide. Let's look at Black wealth. In 1849, the first millionaire, William Lunsford, the earliest known African American to achieve a net worth of $1 million. He lived actually as a free man in New Orleans in the early 1840s, passing as a white man and working as a naval merchant. When he was identified as a black man, he left and he migrated to California, then was the Mexican territory populated with Native Americans and a mixed race of Mexicans nationals. In California, he acquired over 30,000 acres of land, which turned out to be laden with gold just before the 1849 gold rush, was able to turn him into a millionaire. He was the first millionaire African-American descent. He also, some of the things that he established was the first hotel called the City Hotel in San Francisco, the first commercial shipping warehouse, the first public school in California. We'll now switch to a lot of people, we even saw the Netflix, C.J. Madden Walker. She's credited being the first African female to be a millionaire, and actually the first one was Ann Pleasant, who actually started in hair. Ann Malone, who actually started in hair, who actually taught C.J. Madden Walker, who then went on to become the second female millionaire. Alonzo Harrington, those you may not be familiar with, he actually started as a barber himself. That's what we show here. It was actually the African Americans that actually started in hair was actually able to become millionaires. He actually was a black entrepreneur, credited as the first black entrepreneur. He owned the Atlanta Family Insurance, the only African American owned and properly held stock company in the country with capabilities to include personal and business insurance, group life insurance, and dental benefits. He died in 1927, and his son took over the company for him. The first billionaire, African American billionaire, was Robert Johnson. Most of you may know him as the founder of BET. He sits on the board for Lowe's, Smithsonian Institute, the National Museum of African American History. In 2003, Oprah Winfrey became the first black female to become a billionaire. She joined the club. Johnson is no longer a billionaire. However, Oprah still has a company, and Michael Jordan and Robert Smith also accompanied there in the billionaire club with Oprah Winfrey. So let's go to the next slide. So let's return back to the discussion there on faculty. Somebody forgot to pass a memo to Charles Reeson, who became the first African-American faculty of predominantly white college in 1849. And two additional men of color joined him at New York Central, George Vashon and William Allen. And there must be something about being at Central, there at New York Central. As we see within the state of Washington, South Central actually leads the charge with 28 full-time faculty members of African-American descent, 10 more than the next highest being Highland with 18. And there's two other colleges that actually are double digits, both 11 and 12 respectively. A little history union. In 1850, ALC, the American League of Colored Laborers, became the first African-American labor union. Frederick Douglass helped organize this union in response to African Americans having difficulty being able to join white unions. However, it wasn't until 1935 that the first African American union organization became granted within the American Federation of Labor, the BSCP, the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. They addressed low wages, long hours, and mistreatment from passengers. In 1854, let's go to next slide. So you're kind of looking at this HBCU presidents, Brown versus Board of Education, and how did the two tie together? So in 1854, Ashman Institute, now Lincoln University, was founded as the nation's first degree granting institution. As Sabrina Wilson would say on this day in history, on April 29, 1854, it received its charter from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Initially a male-only school, it would later become co-ed. Some notable graduates that you know of: Langston Hughes and Thurgood Marshall. Thurgood Marshall in 1967 would become the first Black justice on the Supreme Court. In 1866, Aspen College was renamed Lincoln University. As you see here, President Lincoln. And as we go through the presentation, you'll get to notice that a lot of the HBCUs, actually all the HBCUs, when they were created, they did not have an African American initially as the president. So as we look at this, if you just stop and Google for a second, the whitest HBCU in America, just Google it. What you're going to find is Bluefield State University. That picture on the left is Brian Capehart. Bluefield State is 86% white, 7% African American. And so what I was going to put in, and I was told not to, so I was going to put the title, "Once You Go Black, You Don't Go Back." I didn't put it in there, so what I did and put Brown versus Board of Education 1954. The thing with that is, the Department of Education, once you actually reach an HBCU status, there is no redesignation. So once you become a Black university, you don't go back. You don't go back. Even if you're approximately 90% white, but all other measures would be a predominantly white university. In 2018-19 academic year, Bluefield State was named the HBCU institutional leader by the Fulbright program. Definitely kudos to Bluefield State University for being able to welcome international students, to be able to have exchange programs there. But as you see, they are not hitting the mark for African American students. But they are an institutional leader in HBCU. Again, once you hit that number as HBCU, you don't go back. President Brenda Island in the middle, a Lincoln alumni, associate provost at Brown University and director of Institution University. She raised $15 million to support diversity goals and led efforts to compliment at Brown University for increasing women and minority student faculty members, full-time faculty members, for 36 and 45% for women and minority faculty members, respectively. She is now the president of Lincoln University. And then as we see there, Lincoln University, HBCU, is actually named after a predominantly white man, even though it's a historically Black college. So you have one historically Black college that actually has white students, predominantly white students, say approximately 90%. And then you have another HBCU that's actually named after a predominantly white man. But definitely, again, those are things you may or may not know, quote unquote, as we talk about America First. So let's go to the next slide. So here's some things that you may or may not know about Morehouse University and its affiliation with Martin Luther King. But again, as we're going to talk about some of the things that you may or may not know about in terms of Morehouse University did not receive its first Black president until 1906. And then also you may not know, in 2008, Joshua Packwood, actually a white student, was the first white valedictorian at Morehouse University. In May 2013, President Obama became the first sitting president in 3/4 of a century to do a commencement speech in the state of Georgia. following in 1938, President Roosevelt that actually went to the University of Georgia. So notable things about Morehouse as well, and as we talk about how we're trying to quote unquote do some diversity things for students and reach students, in May 2019, Robert Smith, in his graduation commencement ceremony speech, decided to give $34 million to pay off all debt for the graduating class of Morehouse University, the class of 2019. In June 2020, Reed Hassan and his wife Patty donated $40 million to the school. And then in July 2020, Morehouse actually received another $20 million from McKee Scott. And then another little tidbit. In April 2019, Morehouse announced it began admitting transgender male students to its population as well. In 1855, switching on to other schools, Berea College in Kentucky became the first interracial co-ed school in the South. See here. In 1856, gave birth to the first African-American college president, Martin Henry Freeman at Avery College in Pennsylvania and Pittsburgh. And Wilberforce University was founded in 1856. And the designation point in 1863, Daniel Alexander Payne became its first African-American president there at Wilberforce University in Ohio. In 1869, George Lewis Ruffin became the first to earn a degree from Harvard Law School. In 1883, he became the first African-American judge in the state of Massachusetts. 1858, the first play was written by African-American, Escape, A Leap for Freedom by William Wells Brown. And then as we talked about, in 1867, Morehouse was formed, known initially as the Augusta College. But it wasn't until 1906 it actually received its first African-American president. Let's go to the next slide. Again, let's stick with that school refusal. We talked about the school refusal again. Describes the sort of a student who refuses to go to school on a regular basis, a problem staying in school. The student may avoid school to cope with stress or fear for a vast number of reasons. And I'm saying this for a reason. I'm playing this theme again and again because as our students come here or they don't, if they leave, are you the reason why? So we really need to be able to think about that. And then kind of showing you a quote here, that quote there on the bottom in terms of combatant commanders. In 2014, there were 0 brigade combat commanders in the U.S. Army, 0. And kind of goes again, we looked at the kind of the picture here. We're going to go left to right. In 1870, James Webster, who actually was the first Black American student admitted to West Point, he actually was court-martialed out. So what that picture you see on the left is actually him actually trying to defend himself to be able to stay in school. So we're talking about school refusal, but here it is, the first African-American student, he's doing everything he can trying to stay in school. No Black candidate had graduated from West Point until Benjamin Davis he arrived in 1932 and he graduated in 1936. Davis ate alone, he roomed alone, and was shunned by his fellow white cadets because he was African American. He was able to graduate in 1936, and so you may know the Tuskegee Airmen. He became one of those who commanded the Tuskegee Airmen in World War II, and he retired as an Air Force general. The next picture you actually see is Colin Powell, which most of you know. Colin Powell became the first African-American Joint Chief of Staff. The next picture in 2018, Lieutenant General Williams became the first superintendent. So again, here we're making progress where we're seeing the first African-American student actually kicked out, having to defend himself. So now we actually have Colin Powell. Now we actually have a superintendent there at West Point. Smith was actually assaulted by other white students and then basically had to defend himself for being assaulted by other white students. As you see, the next picture in the far right is actually General Lloyd Austin. He's now the Secretary of Defense, was actually confirmed in January 21 by a vote of 93-2. I'm not exactly sure what the other two were thinking. We go to the next slide. So again, we're going to hold on to this and come back to this. Because again, we're talking about the school refusal. And again, as we talked about how people like Webster Smith and others fought to stay in school. In 1876, Edward Boucher, whose father was a janitor at university, would go on to complete a PhD in physics in 2 years, becoming the first African American to earn a PhD in the United States. Again, he wasn't the first African American to be awarded a PhD. Patrick Francis Hilly earned a PhD in 1865 from the University of Leuven in Belgium. A Jesuit priest, in 1874, he became president of Georgetown University there in DC, where he is buried today in the University Cemetery. His brother James Hilly, in 1875, became the first black bishop in the U.S. Catholic Church, being appointed by Pope Pius IX for the Portland Diocese. Again, he passed for white, but he was noted being able to assist African Americans, and African Americans knew that he was black, was able to seek him out and be able to get assistance from him. Let's go ahead and play the YouTube video here.
You'll have to give me a second. I don't have this queued up.
So while you do that, I go ahead and talk. In 1906, those of you know Bishop DeAndre Fisher, his brothers formed the first black affinity group in the U.S. called Alpha Phi Alpha in 1906 in Cornell University. In 1907, Alan Leroy Locke of Harvard University became the first black Rhodes Scholar.
Wait.
Go ahead.
Nope.
Evidence shows that the Rhodes Committee did not know that he was black.
Away. Democratic headquarters urgently needs you to sign this
moment. An event.
There we go.
Reveals itself. The 1957 school year is about to begin, and an angry mob is trying to stop 9 black students from entering Central High in Little Rock, Arkansas.
The question I usually get asked is, were we scared? I think initially we didn't anticipate clearly all of the violence and turmoil that occurred. The first day that we attempted to go to school, 8 of us were at one part of the school and Elizabeth Eckford was at another part. And it was the mob that followed Elizabeth. Then you begin to feel that this was a very hostile, violent group of people. Even at that point, I told myself if we didn't go through with it, didn't attend Central and backed out, it would just reinforce the view that the African American community in Little Rock wasn't interested in making a change in things.
During the 1950s, African Americans throughout the country were trying to make their voices heard.
We've
the Negro citizens of Montgomery, Alabama, do now and will continue to carry on our mass protest.
The driver demanded that I give this seat up to a white man. I didn't feel that I was being treated as a human being. I refused to give up this seat. I said no.
Little Rock was a year after the Montgomery bus boycott. So we had seen the impact of Rosa Parks and the beginning of Dr. King's career, and knew that things could change.
All in favor, let it be known by standing on your feet.
The first step for the Little Rock Nine came in May 1954, when the U.S. Supreme Court issued its opinion in the landmark case Brown versus the Topeka, Kansas Board of Education. Separate but equal was inherently unequal, and integration was now the law of the land. In 1957, this decision and the power
So we're going a little over, so we'll go ahead and go to the next slide for time. So here we have a slide about Brown University. We talked about Brown University and kind of the importance it actually has with the HBCUs. In 1964, Brown formalized a program called Brown Tougaloo Partnership, where basically Tougaloo is a black university, HBCU in Mississippi. And then Brown students are able to attend there for a year, and Tougaloo students are able to attend Brown for a year. As you see, the picture on the bottom is June Ellis. Some of you may have seen her in some of the movies. Men of Honor, with Cuba Gooding Jr. playing his wife and so forth, and some of the other movies she's been in recently. King Richard playing the wife of Will Smith there in tennis with the Williams daughters. But she was actually an exchange student at Brown from Tougaloo, decided to stay at Brown, and actually graduated from Brown University. As you see here, Ruth Simmons became the first African-American president in any Ivy League institution. She was president there from 2001 to 2012. She is now the president of Prairie View A&M in Texas, which is an HBCU. Again, we talked about the first president at Brown University, John Hope, was actually a Brown alumni. Again, a white president at a historically black college. But what he did encourage Samuel Morehouse to pursue a PhD. Samuel Morehouse was a graduate of Morehouse in 1925, distinguished science professor, and the first African American appointed to U.S. Atomic Energy Commission. He served with Dwight Eisenhower. He actually went on to graduate and get his PhD for Brown University, as well as Walter Massey, graduated 1958 from Morehouse University, was actually president of School of the Arts Institute of Chicago, for former professor of physics at the University of Chicago, dean of physics at Brown University, and then now president emeritus at Morehouse College. And then in 1877, just to give you another tidbit about Brown University, Emmett Page, a former slave, was elected as the first African-American student body president at Brown University, and believed to be the first black to be elected student body president in any of the nation's predominantly white institutions. We go next slide. So just as we talked about some of the HBCUs, you probably never knew that they had white presidents. And so they were probably talked about as the first black president HBCUs, even though they were white. When Bill Clinton was elected president, he was often referred as to the first black president because it was thought of at the time that, okay, that's the best that we're ever going to do. Again, we go to the next slide. And as we talked about that school refusal, we know we can do better. And so again, we leave you that definition in terms of what school refusal means. You'll examine your own minds and heart if you're playing a part in that or not. there are students there at North Seattle College. And so again, you see the president walking with people who look like himself and so forth. And then we'll go to the next slide. Any questions?
Yeah, I just have a quick question, Greg.
Sure.
What can schools and just institutions in general do to go beyond the lip service of, say, diversity and EDI and all that stuff, and actually like make it more of a reality?
You mean to directly address school refusal? To directly address our persistence rate, attrition rates, and actually ensure that we're making sure that students of color are graduating? I think you have to be
something
deliberate.
simple like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to be deliberate. We're not talking about affirmative action, but we're talking about, even myself, I just signed up to get a mentor. Do people have mentors? Do you have someone that's be able to help you through those tough times, to be able to advise you and so forth? Did you have someone to ask me to check to bounce those things off? Hey, when you run into a glitch, who do you ask for a question? So I'm saying even in my position, those things that I need help in terms of being able to ask one question, students do as well, faculty do as well, and I think that's been part of the challenge. When everybody's having to be the Jackie Robinsons of the world, when you don't have any support and you're kind of going uphill, it's tough. But you need somebody who's been through that experience to be able to kind of help and guide you through that experience. I think it helps. I think obviously, quote unquote, the strength of numbers actually helps. We're actually able to do more. Again, we talked about the first video, not talking about lip service and hey, Black Lives Matters and DEI. We know all the buzzwords, but we're actually making a deliberate attempt to make sure that the BIPOC community, that they are able to be persistent. They are able to go from quarter to quarter. They are able to go from year to year. They are able to graduate. I think you have to be very deliberate. Any other questions?
I do want to read something in the chat. Rose Buchanan says, thank you, Greg, for doing this presentation. I'm currently reading Isabel Wilkerson book, Cast, and the beginning of this video, Little Rock, reminded me of one of the parts in the book about how lynchings used to be, quote, events that photographers created postcards out of to distribute. Insidious the ways that oppression takes and keeps root.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing why I really wanted to harp on the school refusal. When there are blacks before me, when I think of people like my grandfather, my wife's great aunt, and so forth, they stopped school in the 8th grade, and so forth. And so when there's other ones who push to make sure that we can have an education, that we could be successful. Again, we're talking about Webster Smith defending himself to be able to stay in West Point. The whole thing again about school refusal, and then when you have people who don't understand the things that the Black community and others, minority population have had to undergo to do it. We want to graduate. We want to be able to stay in school. We want to be able to make a difference. So I think that that's important that people understand that. And when you understand, hey, why hasn't the student logged in? Why hasn't the person been in class? It's not because we don't. And most of the time I tell people, specifically in the African American community, it isn't that we're not academically, don't have the academic awareness to be able to acumen to graduate. It tends to be other issues that are happening. And again, if we feel unsupported, those definitely can affect the persistent and attrition rates.
I do have another question.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead.
I wanted to know what is being done at North to mitigate things that contribute to school refusal.
And I'll open that up really to anybody to be able to respond with that. But I mean, I can tell you, me personally, You know, I'm trying to have more contact with students. I'm trying to be a resource. I'm trying to be an asset. So I can speak for me personally what I'm trying to do. Anyone else would like to chime in?
Well, if that is it and nobody else has anything that they'd like to ask Greg, I think we will bring this to a close, if that's all right with you, Greg.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming, and we hope to see you at future events. And Greg, you're a wonderful resource, and just from the little bit that we've talked over the past quarter, I've been very grateful for your friendship. And I hope everybody here has a wonderful rest of the day. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry.
Oh, Rose Buchanan had a question.
Oh, Rose.
Sorry, I just
sorry,
had
Rose.
a quick question. I was very interested in the picture and the background, your background. I don't know if you mentioned that, Greg, like what the picture was about. I was looking up the names of the people in this picture, and I figured this must be like a yearbook or something.
It is not a yearbook. It is, let me see here. What I'm going to do, it is actually the founders of the first Black affinity group at Cornell University.
Oh, nice.
And so that's actually what that picture is. For those who may or may not know, both myself and I call him Bishop Fisher, but those who may know, here we go. Whoops. We're both members of Alpha Phi Alpha, the first Black affinity group in the U.S. And those are the 7 founding members in Cornell University that's there in the background.
Nice. Thank you.
Well, okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming, and thank you so much, Greg, for giving us this presentation and for just enlightening us and educating us. We really appreciate that. And anytime you want to give a presentation with student leadership, please hit me up. Okay. Everybody have a wonderful rest. Have a wonderful rest of the day. You guys take care.
Thank you, Greg and Michelle.
Thank you.